folks, and a very warm welcome back to Property Portfolio Building. This is episode 2 for our HMO mini-series. It's one of the two multi-income products that we provide and supply to our clients, and also for ourselves. This episode is all about location, 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 following on from episode 1, which you didn't catch it, with space, light and rights. There's 5 episodes in total, so it's good idea to catch up on them all. Now, location, location, location. There's 3 elements to this. First, we're going to talk about where's the best place to tenant. Second, we're going to talk about a little bit about what that location physically means from a planning and a licensing perspective. And then third, we're going to talk about value, which as an investor is something I'm particularly keen on. So, cracking straight on, location. Now, caveat, there's going to be regional variations here. So we're going to focus on what works for us, and it also depends on what your end client is. Ours is working professionals traditionally, and therefore we're going to be talking more in depth on that, but we will touch on other user classes. So without further ado, location. So the first thing that people ask whenever we're talking about HMOs is, will I end up tenanting my property? And the answer is probably yes. There's very few HMOs that I see, very few rooms available on spareroom.com, which is the #1 website for HMO room availability. And certainly in this period, which is in between Christmas and New Year 2022, we're in a recession, and with Section 24 has been biting, lots of landlords exiting the market, and the number of rooms available has gone down versus the number of people looking to rent has gone up. So there's lots of variation. However, how do I sort of look at the location to give myself the best chance and best opportunity to rent my product? So easy. The first one is easy. Students need access to wherever they're studying. They need somewhere nice to live, and they need access to amenities. It's the easiest one to consider if you're going to provide HMOs, especially co-living HMOs like us. However, the next 2 classes are very similar. One is the professional working class, and the second one is the supported living working class. Sorry, the supported living class. So they're actually quite similar in their needs in terms of location and in terms of what they require in their local communities. So we're going to talk today about the professional working class, which is the co-living environment that we provide. But just bear in mind that some of the supported living elements are still valid, in line with the class that we provide for. So what do we look for? The first thing we look for is a high population density. And where we get that information from, quite simply, is the 2021 census. We take the data based on cities and towns with the highest population density. We look for the highest clusters of housing and clusters of potential working environments. So, industrial parks or large employers or city centres. And we look for the best solution to provide a HMO in those zones. It isn't any more complex than that. As well as the high density of housing, there's a couple of other considerations. First and foremost, HMO users, students, individuals working for either professionals or supported living, generally, you'll get a lot of people who want to work to live somewhere that they don't have to drive. And therefore, you need local amenities. So you're looking for shopping complexes within a mile. I still remember as a student having to lug my bags from Iceland all the way back to my student HMO, all frozen goods. It was absolutely wearing on the arms. So we need to try and get some shopping amenities close by. The second thing, and this is particularly important for the professional class, is access to main, and I say main, road networks for buses or trams or trains. They're the big 3 for me and our organisation when we're looking at the potential of a HMO. Can they get to places of high density of employment? Is it a high density population, somewhere popular to live? And is there shopping and amenities available, doctors, dentists, that kind of thing? And therefore, if those 3 things tick, we generally think, do you know what? This is a good place for a HMO. And don't forget, the census gives you the data that you need. Now, the second location point we're going to move on to is planning and licensing, and it moves nicely on from the first point that we were just discussing, because planning in where we live specifically is a very, very important topic. So I live in the Greater Manchester area, and Manchester Council, which operates mainly the entire of the inners of the M60 plus Trafford Council, have got a blanket no HMO policy. Now, what I mean by that is Some councils have different policies. So if there's a no HMO policy, it's something called an Article 4 direction. And what it means is they've restricted the permitted development rights for someone to turn a Class C3 property, which is a house or a flat, into a Class C4 property, which is a HMO, a house of multiple occupation. So it doesn't matter what class of that is, whether it's low grade, student, high class, it doesn't matter. It's a HMO by classification and planning, and therefore it's been restricted. What does that physically mean to us? Well, it means that we can't automatically convert the property. We have to go through the planning process. Now, depending on the council, and I'll give 2 examples here. In fact, I'll give 3. So there's Manchester Council. Basically, it's a non-starter. They've got a blanket no HMO policy. The only way to get a HMO built is if you go to appeal. And quite frankly, it's a very, very challenging environment. So we don't look at Manchester Council as a specific area to build HMOs right now. The third thing, however, Salford Council, which is on the border of Manchester Council, have brought in their own Article 4 direction to restrict HMO usage, but they've been really clear on what they were doing it for. It's where the clusters of HMOs are more densely populated, and therefore they're restricting the amount of standard C3 housing available to people, and they want to make sure they are keeping that housing stock, which is the #1 housing stock required for the UK, and rightly so. And they use a really helpful interactive map on their website, which shows you where the clusters are. So if you're going to go and apply for an Article 4 direction planning permission, and you can pick somewhere where there's less dense cluster, then chances are if you get a good planning officer you can speak to, they'll probably be supportive of the application. Plus, they haven't done a blanket policy. They've picked literally the streets that they don't want HMOs on. So on that map, there's an area which said Article 4 direction, and it's sort of like the inner area of Salford, close to the universities where there's already high density of HMOs. And while we're talking on planning, you can't escape licensing, because location is so important when it comes to license conditions, because license conditions change council to council. So for example, 2 borough councils in Greater Manchester area, right next to each other, have different kitchen size requirements, and it's literally 2 streets apart. So if you've got street 1 with a kitchen of 11 metres, that means, and you built it in street 2, you wouldn't pass the licence and the whole development wouldn't work. So our advice is to go to a very, very, very clued up architect with the local knowledge of the borough council licence conditions when they're coming to do the building regulations and the layout drawings. Don't just do this yourself. It can be something that people do. Of course it can. And if you know your borough council really well and you really experience this, great. If you're not, pay an architect who understands the licence conditions. And probably a planning consultant who understands the planning conditions. And don't forget, if you build over 6 beds, not 6 beds, if you're building for more than 6 people, because it's people not beds, in your property to house, then you're going to need to put it through planning anyway, because it's a sui generis class. It's no longer Class C4. Class C4 is only up to 6 occupants for a HMO. And if you're doing that, then you need to know whether the local council are going to support it. While we're talking on location, the last point on location from a planning perspective is they understand that people living in a HMO are not necessarily going to have cars, and therefore you need to build in something for sustainable transport. We put bike storage in every single one of our HMOs, and it's again the reason why we choose the main routes for main bus routes, main tram routes and main train routes, because we can demonstrate that we're supporting sustainable transport methods by building in those areas. It's just a really key point for you to consider. The final point on location, value. A inner city Article 4 area can, because it's a more restricted element, can give you a higher yield than an outer town property. Even though you've built a 5-bed or 6-bed HMO, you might get a yield percentage of around 10 to 10.5% in an inner city area where prices are high, versus out of town, which might be as much as 12.5 to 13%. So it's really, really important on location, if you're going for a commercial valuation, that you understand what the local yields are, and the best people to tell you this are RICS surveyors. They will tell you specifically what they're looking for from a value perspective. If you get a good one who has experience with HMOs, and if you've not done this before, speak to somebody that has several HMOs and has come up against different planning people who have done HMOs, or speak to a broker who's done multiple HMOs and get a recommendation for a surveyor to talk to, because they will be able to give you the best information as to what kind of yield you're going to get. And just so we're clear, It can mean the difference between an all money out HMO deal you go again, or a loads of money left in deal, and you're going to be stuck with that one HMO yielding until the next time you get to refinance and you can demonstrate it as a business. So it's really, really important if you're going for commercial valuation to understand the yield perspective. And it's also important to understand the bricks and mortar value of the property, because in certain locations, the bricks and mortar value of the property can be higher than the commercial valuation, in which case you might be better going for a 5-bed HMO based bricks and mortar valuation. But that means you'll have to get it at a much lower bricks and mortar price than if you're doing a commercial valuation, which can sometimes location dependent, open up a wider variety of housing stock, because if the prices are low from a residential point of view, but you can get a good commercial yield, you can generally fit your building works in and get some money back based on that. But obviously speak to the professionals in your local area and local district. And that's it. That's location. I hope that was useful, and we'll catch you on the next one, which is finance, playing the game of two halves. Really, really important topics, and I'll catch you on that one. You take care. Have a good day.